Hello and welcome to the first webinar of Ada Lovelace Day 2021. This is our 13th year of celebrations of women in science, technology, engineering and maths, and we are delighted to have partnered with the STEM Wana Trust to bring you today's discussion about how engineers have been tackling challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. But first, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, without whom this webinar would not be possible. So huge thanks to Red Hat, SUSE, Xero, Jane Street, the IET, Vonage, School Dash, Digital Science, G Research, Software Impacts, the Information Lab, and Work 180 for their invaluable support this year. So without any further ado, I would like to hand you over to our moderator for this evening's panel, mechanical engineer Renée Young.
Hello, no mai, haere mai everyone. Welcome to today. Thank you so much for joining us. The four of us are very excited about the conversation this afternoon. As Sue introduced me, my name is Renée, mechanical engineer. I've had just a little bit about myself, about 14 years experience working through different markets, Asia, New Zealand, Australia, and spending the last 9 years in North America. Over to you, Natasha.
Awesome. Kia ora koutou. Well, hello. My name is Natasha Mudaliar and I'm a civil engineer. So I finished my engineering degree just almost 3 years now and have had the privilege of working for WSP as a transportation design engineer, working on some really awesome large-scale highway projects within New Zealand, and have recently moved from WSP to join our family business, Reliance Reinforcing, where we look at the cut, bend, prefab and supply of reinforcing steel. I'll hand it over to you, Victoria.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a senior environmental engineer in the water team at Beca in Tauranga. Now, I previously was in Christchurch for 6 years and spent a lot of time working on the Christchurch rebuild and flooding work in the region here. But relocated up to Tauranga now, where I lead the water team. And another cool thing that I've done is that I spent 6 months volunteering in the Cook Islands working on their water supply systems. Looking forward to the conversation today.
And hello, my name is Sujata. I'm an electrical engineer. I have been working for the national grid here called Transpower, and my role is in system planning, so making sure that we have an electrical grid that is fit for future need. So that is my role here.
Thank you, ladies. So today our topic is solving problems for real people. We really wanted to focus, I guess, on current problems that everyone is facing at the moment, and how, as engineers, we are addressing these, and then bringing it back to the people, so the people that we serve. I guess, the most topical conversation at the moment, and especially for New Zealand, is obviously since August, we've had, quite a few differences with our alert level changes. How has this affected the construction industry in terms of materials, in terms of, the separation between different regions throughout the country? I might lead into you, Natasha, just given as an operations manager, from your point of view, this would have had quite a huge impact for you.
Yeah, it has had a huge impact on us, but obviously all of New Zealand as well, and I'm sure the rest of the world too. So for those of you who don't know, what's happened in New Zealand is we've all basically gone into alert levels, where Auckland, our biggest city, has gone into alert level 3, which is one of our higher alert levels, and then the rest of the country is basically sort of at alert level 2. So that's meant that it's been quite hard to get a lot of our construction materials and things like that outside of Auckland into our smaller regions. And it's sort of been a real challenge, really, in that sort of space. So I think, like a lot of things, engineers sort of find a way to get around it and make things work. So whether that be, trying to see if we can find supplies from other locations in New Zealand and things like that. has sort of been the challenge that we've had at the moment. And then likewise, obviously, with imports and exports and trying to get goods in and out of New Zealand, that's sort of been a challenge as well. But I think we're trying to do our best at the moment, and I guess just waiting until New Zealand sort of comes out of those alert levels and things sort of resume back to normal.
Yeah, I think, really for the rest of the country, we all appreciated Auckland and how much of our materials and supplies really come out of that major city for us. And obviously with Auckland being under a stronger alert level, it really did have that ripple effect throughout the country. Not just New Zealand alone, but just leading into more remote locations for construction, especially in the Pacific with the remote islands. What we have been noticing is obviously, if you take a small island that may not have the local labour force or even the local material, all of that is offshore. That is totally workable in a normal situation. But now that we have COVID and such a level of uncertainty of getting materials, of getting labour, getting them to the island, we're actually starting to see a lot of budget and schedule increases with that, because if people now need to ship their labour over to a remote island to do the work, they now are having to allow for isolating them when they arrive. And obviously, not only is that time, but that also costs money. So that's been a really interesting thing we've been noticing. Yeah.
I think also just building on that, it's the impact that has on our projects as well. So it's obviously the direct lack of materials, but it's delays or changes to programs. I'm seeing it on one of my projects at the moment, and the archaeologists are now in lockdown in Hamilton, and we can't continue with the work. So it's about how we can reprogram those projects and get the most done that we can while we do have those restrictions in place.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Vic. I guess that leads us into our next topic with COVID-19. Obviously, it is the pandemic and is very medical and health orientated. But bringing in engineering, what are some of the ways that it has affected our engineering industry specifically? We talk about wastewater testing, ventilation for that viral control. I guess Vic, kind of in the water industry, what type of things are you guys seeing?
Yeah, so I guess just to touch on the wastewater testing. So I guess this is probably, when we get a positive result in the wastewater that's unexpected, we hear it in the media, but this is something that's going on behind the scenes. So there's 12 sites around the country that are regularly sampled, and they're sampled at least once a week, with more regular testing going on, particularly in Auckland. And what happens is that they take a sample over a 24-hour period. So every 15 minutes, a bit of that water is collected, and then that water goes back to the lab and is tested for COVID-19. And it's all, I guess, if a positive result comes back, then alarms go off. But there's a process that the team work through, and that's going and doing another test and also taking another sample to confirm whether it is a concern or not. Just because we get a positive test doesn't mean it is cause for alarm. It's known that people do shed the virus for a very long time after they've had it, so it's quite possible that it's a historic case that's come through, or alternatively a case from our MIQ facilities as well. So yeah, that's what's going on with the wastewater testing.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good point, Vic, because I think wasn't too long ago, was it, that we had a positive test for the Bay of Plenty, but then you didn't really hear much on that, and obviously the messaging was from the government was that not to panic, not to worry. It was low risk, and so that kind of makes a bit. It explains it a little once you put it into context.
Yeah, exactly. And the testing's quite sensitive. As a sort of guideline, it can detect around 10 cases in 10,000 people. So that puts it into perspective a little bit as well. So no cause for alarm just because you get one positive test.
Yeah. Ventilation control, I think, is something that has a massive impact, but it doesn't get a lot of airtime. It's not really something that they talk about in the government announcements, and it's definitely not something that you hear people talking about within the community. But with engineering through ventilation control, you really can make a difference, especially within hospitals. We can strongly negatively pressurize a space. So, say 12 air changes per hour or higher of a space, so that if we have positive COVID patients in there, we're, extracting that air, running it through a HEPA filter, and then exhausting it to the atmosphere. And what it does is, obviously, with that negative pressure, we're protecting the other people in the surrounding spaces so that there isn't cross contamination. Um, I'm not sure if you recalled, but I think Jacinda did kind of mention it a couple of days ago, where she said that if you were a passenger in a taxi or an Uber, that they recommended winding the windows down, which I thought was quite a funny comment. But it makes sense, right? Like with the airflow, with that change of air changes per hour within that car space. And I think we are seeing that a lot, obviously, with the new restrictions, especially in Auckland. We've been able to socialise outside, um, I mean, Natasha, you kind of, how's that, have you seen with the social interaction much of a change there?
In Auckland, there's been a huge change in social interaction.
Yeah.
Whether everybody's been compliant or not, I guess, is a different story. But look, it's definitely been tough in Auckland with having been, level 4 and level 3 for the last almost 2 months now. And I think people are sort of getting quite itchy being at home, and, they sort of just want to get out and meet friends and be able to, I guess, just interact. But we've got to do our part. And so, like I say, just waiting for things to kind of, get better and for us to kind of move out of those alert levels and back into, being able to play outside, really. But I guess with that, speaking about COVID and the way in which engineering has sort of been able to help in that sense, I think, technology has been huge in that as well, and I think we kind of maybe didn't realize the how powerful Zoom and MS Teams and all of those platforms and, Facebook and Instagram and all of the social media as well. And I think COVID's really heightened, how powerful technology can be, where we, even though we're distant, we're still able to sort of feel connected in that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's with the changes in alert levels, and especially when we do go into that alert level 4, I think quite often it's easy for us to forget that there are a lot of utilities and services that just need to be business as usual, regardless of the fact that we are in alert level 4. When you hear the term essential workers, I think for most people, you think healthcare, you think doctors, you think nurses. But it really is quite a broad spectrum of people, because I guess Sujata, being in that electrical industry, with power utility, you guys are an essential service, and your people are essential workers. I mean, how have you guys coped with the drastic alert level changes?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. So yeah, we need power regardless of whether there's COVID or not, right? So we provide a 24/7 service, but I guess COVID has helped us think about, which of our staff are like critical, So the people in the control centers that managed the power system day to day, 24/7, and also our maintenance staff, right? So all of them would be in control centers, but they needed to be protected because they needed to come in through COVID times. They needed to be protected. So what our company ended up doing is that we kept them in a bubble. They were a bubble of their own, and we kept the rest of the staff away from them. They had, they were in their own kind of space. They had their own bathrooms that no one else could use. And as engineers, the other thing that we do is we always think of the worst case scenario. So what if one of your control centers, someone was COVID positive, or it could be many other things, right? In resilience terms, like it could be an earthquake incident or a fire incident or anything that's like high impact, low probability. What do you do? So you always have more than one control center just in case anything happens to one of them. So in New Zealand, we have two control centers that are for operating the power system and then two that are for maintenance. How have we maintained working throughout this time? The other thing that we've also done with the rest of the staff, even before COVID started, is that we started to work towards business continuity. So we had these kind of mandates to take your laptop home, so you don't really have like a break in workflow or anything like that, no matter what event happens. And I think that all of that kind of came out of like earthquake events that we'd had in the past, because New Zealand is again on the ring of fire, right? So we have a couple of these kind of events happening, and so we learned from that, and hence we were better prepared when we had to adapt to COVID.
There's a lot to say, isn't there, about Kiwis and the natural disasters with seismic activity that we've really had to adapt and kind of think, be able to react naturally at,
Yes.
and kind of that rollover effect really into how it applies with COVID. Yeah. When we talk about, resilience, Sujata, you mentioned obviously business resilience, which has been a main focus, but I guess, how there is also that personal element, that mental health and well-being element to resilience. I guess how are each of you navigating that new territory? Because it is new territory for a lot of us.
I think we've been pretty lucky here in New Zealand that we've had the opportunity to kind of watch it unfold around the world before we've had to deal with it. We've been quite lucky in that sense, but we've also had I suppose a lot of mental health resources, not only in the company, but I think, our Prime Minister's been pushing for, talking to mental health specialists. And I think there's a lot of support around, which is really, really cool. I think people come together because they're more understanding. I think I was probably the most social during the first lockdown because we were all checking in on each other. We were all making sure, how you doing? People don't normally ask that when when you're in the office, but it was almost heightened when we were in lockdown. What do you guys reckon, Natasha and Victoria?
Yeah, I think it's I think communication and connections are the key. both in our social lives, but also in our work environments. You lose those kind of ad hoc conversations that you have in the hallway and about projects and things, and it's making sure that we maintain those connections with those that we're working on projects, so that we're still delivering high value outcomes as well. But I think the resilience aspect of it is really interesting, and I think it's human nature that we do find a way to get around it. But it's no doubt a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's about staying positive, staying motivated, staying focused, and I guess also obviously it's not the most ideal situation, but trying to make the most of it as well. So for some that might mean, hey, actually you've got a little bit of extra time, a couple of hours a day that you would have used in transport to either do a little bit of extra work or actually put that time aside to do some of the hobbies that you love. So for myself, I actually love doing puzzles, which I get mocked a lot about. My friends are just like, "You're a grandma. What is this?"
I'm with you, Natasha.
Oh, I get mocked about it so much, but it's actually mean I get a little bit of time to sit at home and do a puzzle, and maybe listen to an audiobook or listen to a podcast. And I haven't actually been able to have that time to myself. So for others that might mean being able to pick up a book or going for a walk or doing a bit of extra exercise at home. So I guess that there has also been that plus side, a bit of time, which I think has been nice as well.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? How your parameters and your immediate environment changes. I think for me it was too easy to be constantly working. Like to open that laptop. I didn't also establish right from step one a clear, spatial. This is where I work, and then this is where I'm not working. It was all mixed in together. So then I just ended up blurring into super long hours in a long week. And it's funny that it wasn't until kind of week 3 that I was like, hang on, like I need to designate this is work. And then obviously when I leave, I pack it up, I put it away, and then it's my own personal downtime. And just like little things like that, I think, all learnings along the way. Yeah.
I think it's worth acknowledging, like around that different work environment too, that in our industry, it's our work hasn't slowed down because of lockdowns. If anything, it's the opposite. It's increased, and it's changed too. It's projects might get on hold because of lockdowns and site work, but that doesn't mean the work stopped. It's changed to something else. It's changed to looking at hospitals and how we can improve ventilation systems there, or wastewater sampling, or other things. So there's definitely no shortage of work in the industry as a result of COVID.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I guess when we kind of reflect on, those general lessons that we've had from the pandemic in terms of preparedness, and impacts, how there is a bit of crossover, I guess, with climate change, in terms of preparedness, and what are the type of things or themes or connections that you girls currently making, I guess, with how we can kind of grab those things we've learned from the pandemic and cross them over into those climate change problems.
I think a really good example, I guess, it's around complacentness. So, I liken it to say, the QR code test scanning. For those that aren't in New Zealand, we have QR codes that we need to scan when we go out anywhere, into any shops, supermarkets, etc. And as cases go down, or we haven't had lockdown for a while, people get complacent and they stop scanning and they stop tracking where they're going. But as things become heightened again, then there's a really good response, and people are doing that. But I think that's a really good comparison to that in the climate change world is might be where we are building our houses. Maybe they're liquefaction prone grounds or flood prone areas, and we might not have had an earthquake for a while or a flood for a while. So people think, oh, it's fine to build here, we can go and build, but actually, then an earthquake happens and you may not touch that area for 50 years. So I think, there's definitely some similarities around sort of relaxing when we get out of those immediate worrying times, and kind of forget about the consequences of it.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? It's quite human nature.
Very much so. Yeah.
I had a note on air quality. Now, due to the pandemic, we had fewer cars on the road and fewer emissions and maybe fewer factories operating. And I saw this photo going around, like probably early when we started lockdown the first time last year, of the Himalayas from Delhi, which is like a big city in India, and it's notorious for its poor air quality. And it was probably the first time you could see the Himalayas in ages. And you could see the impact that actually locking down and the fewer cars on the road had on nature and had on the environment. I remember stopping in Delhi airport before the pandemic, when I was on vacation in India, and you could not see a meter outside the airport window. Like, it was like that much smog that you couldn't see anything. And then even roaming around, like on the streets, if we were walking and stuff, like I had to wear a mask. This was pre-pandemic. Still was wearing a mask, just walking around in Calcutta when I was visiting, and because otherwise, basically, the insides of your nose start burning, and like you develop like a flu from like just from the air, like just from how dirty the air is. And people forget that like air quality like leads to like deaths, and it reduces life expectancy on average about 2 years per person.
Oh, wow.
Depends on air quality, and particularly in Delhi, as I was saying, that it's like one of the worst places to be for like air pollution. Reduces life expectancy by like 9 years. That's what I found out. So I mean, like in a way, like I remember thinking, man, we have to like maintain this, like the level of like cleanliness that's like come from having lockdown and not having so many emissions, and it kind of makes you want to speed up this pace for a more renewable future.
That actually, just you mentioning that, Sujata, kind of made me reflect a little, I guess, on New Zealand. We're so lucky here with the air quality. We live in a beautiful place. We're a remote island. It always feels like we've got ample fresh air, and I think maybe because of that, perhaps we had a bit of a slower uptake on wearing masks, and kind of bringing that into our daily life, because for us it was quite a significant change. Whereas if you were in Delhi or Hong Kong or China, Shanghai, it is kind of normal for them, especially when you're sick, to be wearing masks, just because of the high population density, because of the poor air quality. So it is quite interesting, isn't it, how just from our perspective and our experience, it was like a big ask, and then for others, it's just kind of the norm.
Exactly, it's a massive adjustment there, and like our increased hygiene measures of like cleaning, sanitizing, yada yada. We're having fewer flus as a result. And so it'd be quite nice to like continue these kind of practices into the future. So yeah.
No, absolutely. And that kind of rolls us into, as we kind of just talking about people, I think one of the real things, and ladies, we talked about this, in our previous conversations, was engineers are naturally very rational, very pragmatic. We love to solve problems. We love to hit that objective. But, does that sometimes give us a bit of a blind spot to to the real people that our engineering solutions will affect? Um, you know, how are we thinking about the community, and the real day-to-day lives that we are touching? Um, we actually have a really good question here from Isla Rose. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. But she asks the question of, I guess, during this pandemic time, what have been some of the things that we've achieved, or engineering solutions that we can reflect and be really proud of?
I think the main thing for me is, and Sujata touched on it before, is that business continuity. So I know it's not, I guess, a specific project or item, but it's us, the fact that we've been able to maintain working almost as normal. There hasn't really been a period of time where we've had to stop working for a few days or a week. It's really just a simple matter of transitioning to home into the office if we change alert levels. And I think that's something that I think we can all be proud of, is how we have managed to keep going and keep working on our projects and meeting our clients' needs. Been really impressed with that.
Yeah, that's a really lovely point, Vic. I think during the pandemic, for me, I've had the privilege of working with the Ministry of Health, for the COVID works, and upgrading our national infrastructure in hospitals throughout the country. Um, that's obviously there's a very tangible contribution that I feel like I'm making in that regard. But what I have, I guess something that I didn't consider in the immediate value for me was talking to some of my friends that they're not engineers, they're mothers. Um, there is such a hysteria and a panic that we see in the media. And I think the media really does focus on gaps rather than progress. And so for them, they're just kind of hearing all the gaps, like all the things where we don't have the infrastructure, or we're not meeting these targets, or we're doing this not as well as other countries. And I was able to give them a very general, not specific, but very general example of how we really do have a team of experts working behind the scenes, that are engineering and solving problems to upgrade, the infrastructure in hospitals throughout our country. Um, and I mentioned lightly, touching on ventilation and that control of negative spaces. The stuff that we're doing is massive, and it's really good, and it's going to set the country up for future scenarios. And I don't think that good stuff really gets talked about that much. But just even being able to share that with my friends, I could tell that they felt relieved, that they were like, oh, great, there are people, working on this stuff. So that's something I've personally been really proud of. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess sorry, I was just going to say, for us, I guess it's been a little bit different as a business owner, and for us, it's about keeping our team together, and making sure that everyone's okay, that people still get paid, that they've still got food on their tables, to feed their families and their kids. So that's been a big thing for us, is making sure that we can actually look after our team and look after our people, and I guess and that hits home, to be able to really look after your team and make sure that they're okay, particularly during a time like this, has been really important for us. So
yeah, that's really lovely. It's a really good point, Natasha.
And I'd just say last thing, for us at Transpower, it would be about keeping the lights on, regardless of what the situation is. When there is, I guess, a maintenance like problem or anything, like being able to deploy staff out there and getting things done in a safe manner. Safety is top of mind, especially when you're working with, high voltage stuff. So, whether it's COVID, whether it's, working with unsafe things, safety comes first, right?
Absolutely. And I think especially with power, when people don't notice a change or they don't notice anything, that's when you guys are doing your work, like that's when you're doing your magic, because people aren't noticing that there's any problems, and it's just complete business as usual given the circumstances. We talk about, when we're kind of focusing on the people and the communities, we did kind of discuss, I guess, diversity in engineering, diversity in workforce, and how this changes and affects the engineering industry. Obviously, as for women in engineering, we've got one question here from Fuentish. She wants to know, her 9-year-old daughter wants to know at what age each of us knew that we wanted to be an engineer.
I can.
Oh yes, Sujata, go.
Yeah, I can kind of remember. Like, I feel like there was a pivotal point, but I'm sure it would have happened gradually. But I remember there was a group from University of Auckland that had come to visit my high school in my physics class, and there were, I think, maybe 2 or 3 engineers, different specializations, and they came to me and said, basically, these are all the cool things you can do with engineering, and your options are not limited. You're not making one choice and then that's it. And then, yeah, I think that kind of made me think, hey, like, I like my sciences and my math, and I don't have to be a doctor. Like, it can be something else. And so I kind of remember that as like one of the main points where I was like, oh, I think I'm going to explore this.
Really cool. Natasha, how about you?
Yeah, for me, growing up as a kid, I loved Lego. I honestly loved Lego and puzzles, Legos and puzzles. So I guess just being able to create stuff and put stuff together, and and then see the final outcome and being like, wow, I did this. That sort of feeling, I guess, I've kind of always grown up with. So sort of that, in combination with the fact that my dad is a civil engineer as well. So growing up, when health and safety wasn't so much stringent as what it is now. Dad used to take me out on construction sites and things like that, and being able to see things go from paper to something in real life. That was awesome. So I think sort of the combination of those two things, and then sort of growing up and being like, oh, I'm actually not too bad at math, and physics I can do. So got to year 13 at the end of high school, and it was sort of like engineering or medicine, and then in the end just ended up picking engineering, because I was like, look, I think for me, choosing engineering, there's a greater why, and that why is about really being able to, help communities and help people and make that difference. And as fluffy as it might sound, we all have our why, and for some engineers that might be, hey, look, the paycheck when it comes in looks quite nice, and I like that, and for others it might be, well, actually, I like seeing the difference that I can make. So I kind of grew up around it, and then that's kind of brought me to where I am today.
Vic, how about you?
Yeah, so I was one of those annoying kids that always asked why, and even when I got an answer, I'd still say but why and but why. Um, but I guess it probably wasn't really until late in my high school years that I considered doing engineering and actually understanding what it was. So, and then, like, I mean, even when I went to university and started studying engineering, it was kind of like, yeah, this sounds cool. It suits what I'm good at and what I like. But do I want to be an engineer? So, yeah, I guess it's I just followed what I enjoyed, and it sort of just happened, really.
Quite organic for you.
Don't regret it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I think for me, I didn't have any engineers in my family, so I didn't actually really know any engineers. My parents were teachers, so obviously they really loved me doing my science and my maths, Um, but it was interesting. I really loved graphic design. Like I really loved it, and I thought there was just one avenue for that. So I was actually considering going, I think, to University of Victoria to do graphic design, and then it was actually my year 13 careers advisor, who was a woman, that said, "Have you considered engineering?" And I was like, I don't really know what that is. Like, you've just said a word. I don't really know what that is or what engineers look like, And she actually, bless her, she organised to take a group of us up to the Auckland University Open Engineering Day. So it was really cool. And I've got to be honest, it would have to be the robots that totally sold it for me. They had one demo happening there, and there were these really cool robots, and I was like, okay, wow, yeah, if I get to do that kind of stuff and study, like, yeah, sign me up. So, and then obviously now I've ended up designing infrastructure for buildings, which is quite different, but yeah, love it, definitely love it all the same. Um, so I actually think, Natasha, we kind of talked about, when we reflecting back on diversity of engineers, of the workforce, we talked about how I guess the difference in engagement with local iwi for the fact of feeling like we needed to tick a box versus actually understanding that to really be able to provide a solution that works for all people of all communities, you actually kind of need someone from each of those backgrounds to be at that table. um I guess, yeah, do you want to kind of roll into that or what we talked about? So I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, so I guess it was a conversation around, as you say, how do we involve, local people, Indigenous people, or whoever it may be who are in that area where we're trying to, make a change, whether it be, through roading infrastructure, through building infrastructure, whatever it is. And I guess what I was saying is that I think we've seen a real shift in our engineering process and the way in which we as engineers actually approach that. So as you say, I think in the past it's been very much so, okay, we're here to tick a box. We know that you need to be involved in this process just so you can say yes and we can move on. Whereas now it's, hey, look, let's all be part of this journey. Let's all start from square one. And we all get to the end together as a team. And I think one of our most notable projects, particularly in New Zealand, is our Manawatu Gorge Highway, which is down in Palmerston North. If anyone who's not in New Zealand knows the geography, so it's just above Wellington and our North Island. So that project has been awesome. In the sense that it's been able to involve local iwi right from the start and at the governance board level of that project. So they've been able to basically have a say right from the start, and also be a part of the nitty-gritty decisions as well. So, you know, it being, okay, here are some roading options, this is what we think, or where we think we could put the motorway, what do you think? And for them, it's not just, oh, wait, we don't like that, that doesn't look nice, and that sort of thing. But Renee, you were saying before, it was actually, you know, this land means something to us, you know, it has wairoa, it has spiritual value to us. And listening to that and being like, okay, you know, so now we understand why we can't put the road here and it's got to go there, and, you know, understanding all of that. And I think it's been really awesome to see that, and it's been a two-way learning process. So you've got, you know, locals learning about engineering and what engineering is, and, you know, why we can't do certain things, and likewise, you know, for engineers to learn about local culture, local values, you know, and all that sort of thing. And I think I mentioned as well that our design team actually got to go down to a local marae and stay at the marae and meet locals and actually talk to them about the project and how they feel. And it was just so awesome to see their excitement about, you know, wow, this is really going to make a difference in our community. You know, you don't know how much, you know, a motorway means to us, you know, because it cuts down 30 minutes of our travel time, you know, and things like that. So it's really been, I think, an eye-opening project for the New Zealand Transport Agency as well, to say, hey, look, actually, you know, this process works. And not only that, but it actually makes jumping through the hoops faster. So, you know, I think it's had one of the fastest environmental protection turnaround times in history, almost, I think. And wow. Yeah, as I say, it's just been awesome to be able to learn, have that two-way learning process, and see the outcomes and see how, you know, people who actually live down there, how they actually feel about, you know, the stuff that us engineers are doing. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I saw that firsthand as well in the work that I did over in the Cook Islands. It was, yeah, I guess being a young white female, I definitely didn't fit into their normal engineer definition. And, you know, it was quite important that we did engage with the local communities, and the work that I was doing was on not actually on Rarotonga itself, but the Painua, the outer islands of the Cook Islands. And it wasn't, I couldn't go in there and say, I've come up with this engineering solution. I think, this would work you well. It was very much about going into and meeting the island councils and, bringing them along that journey and actually helping or guiding them to come up with the solutions themselves. And, it was important that I had with me representation that they had relationships with as well, so that we could all talk as one, I guess. Very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, you know, as engineers, we have a list, I guess, of criteria or objectives that we need to meet to solve this problem, and it's actually kind of changing our mentality to understand that those, you know, the spiritual or the land or the indigenous people, like those are also part of the objectives at that first step, you know, like those are also some of the parameters that we need to be solving as part of this engineering solution, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah, totally, or else we're just kind of navigating with half the information, you know, like with one of our eyes closed kind of thing.
Yes, I was just going to add there, like stakeholder engagement is so important, because, you know, like what happens when you don't get their approval? Like what happens if you're kind of forcing your infrastructure project or any kind of project like onto them? Like, you know, like I have an example from the past. Before I started working, apparently one of our CEOs from quite some time ago, people of a small town called Tirau here were burning effigies of them and the Prime Minister at the time, because we had proposed to put a transmission line through their town, and they weren't happy about it. So so they can really pose like a roadblock if you're not on board, and if you don't do your stakeholder management, or you don't like bring them on board and don't listen and seek to listen and understand and come up with the solution that's best for both of you, it can really just stall your project, right? And the other point, just carrying on from what Natasha was saying, was that a way to kind of understand these differences is to hire diversity, right? Have the people that are making these decisions, have the people that are at the table also come from diverse backgrounds, so you have that kind of sensibility to kind of understand different, whether it's cultural or what have you.
It's like it really comes down to just understanding the end user better, isn't it? Because, and I actually think I saw something that was actually a quote from Steve Jobs. Is one of the pivotal changes in the journey of Apple was that he said, as software engineers, they were so focused on creating, the iPhone as this, it needs to do this, it needs to do that. But all of those questions that they were answering were from a software engineer's perspective. And he actually was like, we need to be thinking about the end user. We need to be thinking about the guy down the street or the woman down the road that is going to be purchasing this iPhone. What are their needs? Are we meeting them? And it really is, stepping into the shoes of the community that you're going to affect, that you're trying to make their life easier. I mean, that really is the objective, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
I'll just open the floor again, as we have 10 minutes for our time slot. If anybody has any questions that they want to just post in the comments box. I mean, ladies, is there any kind of other little topics or comments you want to make as we wrap this call up?
Yeah, I guess just one comment I wanted to make, going back to the impacts of the pandemic and climate change, but that's just the impact it's had on, the impact that COVID has had on our emissions and transport habits and things like that. It's going to be really interesting to see. Well, obviously, there's been a lot less travel as a result of the pandemic, and that's had a direct impact on our emissions reductions. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see going forward, whether we can sustain that. I think that's a real challenge that we can set ourselves, because it's been awesome that we have made some progress in that space, kind of forced, unfortunately. But yeah, Natasha, you might want to comment on that, because I know it's your background.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's been really interesting in terms of changing the individual's mindset about where they need to work and how they can work, because obviously, everyone's, most people are sort of stuck at home, and they need to do their work from home now, and that's sort of become the norm. So there's no need to hop in a car and drive to the office or anything like that. So I think that in itself will sort of change the way in which people think about their workspaces, and whether they, actually need to make that commute and go into work as the first step. And then, of course, the option of walking and cycling and public transport, as that sort of starts to get better. And we start looking at, these 20-minute livable cities, where, the concept of effectively having your dwelling in a place where you're 20 minutes away from the amenities that you need, whether it be, you know, healthcare, education, you know, a gym, food, you know, all those sorts of things. I think we're sort of really moving into that space. It's definitely not a new concept, because I know that there are countries overseas like Paris who are doing it, and they're doing it well. I know that here in New Zealand, Hamilton is looking towards, you know, moving in that direction, or they've sort of started the ball rolling. But it's definitely something that we here in Auckland sort of need to start moving towards as well. So with that, you know, walking and cycling and those sorts of things become a lot more normal. And I guess it's quite interesting in New Zealand, because I think we've got almost an ingrained history of sitting in your car and driving somewhere, you know, and it almost feels odd when you're sort of like, oh, I've got to catch the bus, or I've got to catch a train, and it's like, you know, what's happening? So I think there is a little bit of that, as well as sort of just changing our mindset about, actually, you know, it's okay to catch a bus, it's okay to catch a train. And I think once we sort of have that reliable transportation system, then that's when we'll really start to see that change. So
can I ask a question, Natasha?
Yeah, go for it.
So is it 20 minutes by walk? Like 20 minutes by walk to all of your... Wow.
It's almost like, can we use put a challenge out there, but can we use the pandemic as a catalyst for this change? Or I know it's a change over time, but and it requires a change in culture and people's perspectives. But, you know, has this sort of started?
Because wouldn't it? Change? Yeah, no, Vic. Like, wouldn't it just be incredible? I guess through the pandemic, and obviously, you know, the fear and the anxiety and the stress through that all, you know, it gives us this big cultural shift and this big mental shift on how we, you know, transport, and how we live our day-to-day lives. Like, wouldn't that be incredible if that's the, you know, big silver lining that we get from it? It's, I know that, you know, there's cities in America where you definitely need a car, you know. Texas would be one of them, you know. In Austin, you definitely need a car. When I relocated to Canada, I was based in Toronto first, and obviously moving there without having a car, and having owned a car since I was 15, and then all of a sudden not having a car, and trying to make that shift of, okay, yes, it's a 25-minute walk. That's not actually that long, really, you know, like making that mental shift. Okay, you can just jump on the underground train. Okay, you can just take the tram. And once you kind of put those day-to-day habits in, you'll notice that, you know, that change in your behavior. And I think, you know, Auckland is a good example. It's too easy to jump into your car, be one person in the vehicle, and drive from A to B. You know, if we're able to, you know, have that cultural shift, it could just make a massive difference. Okay, well, that, I guess it's a nice way to kind of wrap up, I guess, on a silver lining for, you know, the issues that we've been dealing with lately. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that joined us this afternoon. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Vic, Sujata, Natasha, thank you so much. A big thank you to STEM Wana for giving us this opportunity and connecting us with Finding Ada, and Sue's work. I know it's definitely been a bit of a highlight for me. Ladies, if you want to say anything.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Oh, sorry, Natasha. I was just going to say, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity and this platform, and also giving me a reason to, you know, learn about Ada Lovelace. you know, like I didn't know about her before, and now I'm kind of like, do you know the first programmer was female? But yeah, thank you so much, Sue, and STEM Wana as well. And thanks, Renee, for facilitating.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone that's joined. Yeah, it's really awesome to have the interest in yeah, and what we're here to talk about today and STEM. So yeah, keep it up.
Just a big thank you to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, team. All right, everyone have a lovely afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us again.